Thank you so much, Vicky. Wow, what an extraordinary amount of amazing information, and from Dr. Heather and Dr. John. For me personally, it's everything that most of my adult life has been about, here in Brisbane, playing music and 4ZZZ, so it was like a beautiful mind wonderland, seeing all of that stuff. And so much of my peers musically and radio peers as well, so thank you so much from me personally. We shall go to some questions here. This is such a great situation. I'm glad I put my bifocals on. That would have been a rookie error. This is a question for both of you, which sounds like a good way to start. I'll start with you, John. What was the pivotal moment for you that made Brisbane no longer feel like Pig City?
Honestly, are you kidding? Brisbane was and is Pig City. Honestly, I don't feel like anything has changed. You know, governments have changed, but it's no different. It was a difficult place to be different in, and it's still that. Yeah.
I completely agree. I think that the only thing that really changed is that, especially given that, we're both, I'm white, I'm older. I think if Brisbane became less like Pig City, it was just because I was becoming a middle-aged white woman and was no longer being bothered by police. And you know what I mean? Like this idea that things are freer now.
Yes.
You need to ask young people that question.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I have quite a tongue-in-cheek joke sometimes, and I say I'm too privileged to go to a pride parade these days, and it's kind of that thing. If you feel comfortable, then you need to have a deep look at those that feel uncomfortable still.
You need to have a good look at yourself.
Yeah, true. All right. True that. Another group question. This is very... I think this is a good one. I like this one from the terms of research and collections and the change in technology. And I had a good think about this myself, about collecting information, and with now digitising of music and the dissipation of print media and things like that, and maybe FM broadcasting as well. We don't know what the future of that is and the relevance to younger people. So, Heather, what do you think the increasing digitisation of music and radio mean for the future of public culture in Meanjin?
I'll talk about radio maybe, and then John can talk about music. Would make sense. I think that there is, while the way that 4ZZZ operates may change over the years, what we need to understand is that these community radio stations aren't just places for people to go to create playlists and play music. Like, yes, anybody can create an internet radio station at home. Anyone can curate a daily playlist that other people enjoy listening to from the comfort of their own bedroom. But it's not community radio because there's no community there. And what is so important about community radio is not necessarily the music being played or the technology platforms. As they always change, but what stays the same is that you come in to do a show and you might meet the first person that you've ever met who's been in prison before because your show's on before Locked In. Or you might end up panelling for Dykes on Mics when you're a brand newbie at ZZZ and you don't know any queer people. And, so it's really about being a physical space where people who don't necessarily know each other get to know each other. And you're not going to digitise that. You can't put an algorithm on that. So I feel confident in that respect.
It's funny that you say that because the footage of the people building the station really struck a chord with me. Only last Wednesday I fanged it into the car park last minute like I ordinarily do, trying to get ready to do Dykes on Mics, and it was on the eve of the supposed arrival of Alfred, and there were people all over the place strapping down the old toilet block at the front and nailing things in, and it was just, and I thought, wow, that was them building the station, and 50 years later that collective spirit is there fortifying it against a cyclone. It was really moving to watch, yes.
There were people that slept at the station all the way through that just to make sure that it stayed on air.
That is correct, yeah. John, what do you feel about history
What do I
collection?
feel? What do I think?
Or think?
These things are so different. Look, I just want to... I think anybody who posts a question and calls themselves anonymous shouldn't expect to get a response for a start. But I think they can. I think this addresses another question here, which was, as music people, how do you become library people? I think getting to this point...
That's not the questions being answered, though.
No, but I think this is relevant to me. So, and often with these things, I don't kind of... It's not that I don't care. I was going to say I don't give a fuck about what other people think or expect. All I have is me and how I can respond to the place that I am in my life. That's kind of like the core of what goes on behind the work that I do. So I get to this point where, you know, I've talked about it before, friends dying and stuff like that. At the same time, you know, my kid's getting older and I'm getting sick of the fact that the house is full of all the stuff that I've been collecting all my life. And so I do things like this. All of the audio recordings that I've done between 1979, the very first tape recordings that we did, Lindy Morrison, Robert Forster, Irena Lucas and I, at Triple Z with Wayne, whose surname I just can't quite remember, right through, sorry? Wayne King, thank you very much, Mark. Right through all of the 4-track stuff we recorded, all the 8-track stuff, 16-track right through into the 90s, all of the sort of bands that I was in, all of that stuff now lives in the library and it's all been digitised. And I've spoken to all of the people who own that material and asked them to turn it into Creative Commons available. So the notion of things belonging to me is being loosened over time. And I think one of the things about that I think is important is that it helps me to feel more like, you know, doing things like this and being part of that, opening up those kind of that creative work. It makes a community, right? So every time we get together and talk about these things, we sort of reconnect and so this community, which appears to be something that exists in the past, you know, the Brisbane's music subculture or something like that, 70s, 80s, it feels like it's gone because that's already 40 years ago or something. It's not really gone. In fact, it's important, and that's why people keep turning up to things. And then after the thing, they talk and they... So I just feel like the future of public culture, it's like, I don't know, you just make it yourself. I think governments are completely pointless. I'm not an anarchist or anything, but I really feel like the future lies in these sorts of things where we get together and where community radio exists, where people connect with one another, and in the midst of difficulties, you know, difficult times, solutions are found by the building of community. Yeah. And I don't mean online communities necessarily or digital communities.
Well, and I think that might feed into another question that's here, and that is specifically for you. And Anonymous says, thanks for the presentation.
Come on, which one of you? No.
Put your hand up. And And the question asks, what do you think young musicians can learn from listening to the oral histories of older musicians? And the thing that I'm interested in that question is when you talk about the collecting of the materials, and these are not materials that people digitised music, I guess, allows us to collect. And so these stories become even more important. But do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I suppose so. I'm a bit, I've been teaching at a university for the last 25 years. Oh, I don't anymore, but for the last 25 years or so, and I've never felt relevant ever. And this has been pointed out to me on a number of occasions, my complete irrelevance. And I used to really like it. We would get people to come in. I've talked about this before. We would get somebody from what I would consider to be a young band, somebody from the 90s, to come in and talk to the students. And the students wouldn't even know who they were because they might be relevant to their parents. So the notion of relevance, is kind of like a bit sort of pointless or something. So I don't know whether these stories are important or relevant to young people, but I think that they're not stories about music, they're just stories about people and how they awake in the world or something. And I think that not everybody has creative confidence. Not everybody feels that they can express themselves in front of other people, and maybe seeing these things or listening to these things helps people to realise that everybody has something to contribute. We all have something to contribute. Nobody is any more special than anybody else, and people should pick holes in how I arrive at this list, of people to talk to, because they are all mostly middle-aged to elderly white men, because they're me. All I'm doing is kind of replicating me digitally.
Well, we won't start with you asking this question. We'll start with Heather. Because we might already know what the best thing was that you've uncovered in the library collection, but
well, I should just address that just for a second.
Sure, let's let Heather address it first.
Because I didn't even look in the library collection.
You didn't research.
No,
we
I didn't do any research. Exactly.
That's why I'm starting with Heather.
Here.
I'm throwing you a bone, John. So I know you can't answer this. Just go with me. Heather, what was the best find you've uncovered in the library collection?
I wasn't even listening to what John was saying before because my brain was like, what was it? Because I swear, every time I came home from the library, I would be like saying, oh, I found this and oh, I found that. And now I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything that is related specifically, like really directly related to this project. But one thing that I did find, which is in the Kitty Van Vuren collection, which is, I went to that because she was a woman that was at 4ZZZ in the 90s and earlier as well, but I knew her in the 90s. And she had archived all of the first season of Locked In, which is now the 4ZZZ request show, but originally was a pre-recorded news and current affairs program that went out over the community radio network. And the first episode contained an interview with Joh Bjelke-Petersen, done by one of the prisoners who was on the roof of one of the 3 rooftop protests that happened in Bogger Road after the trial where Joh Bjelke-Petersen was being charged with something, and there was a problem with the jury. They found out later on that one of the members of the jury was a massive National Party fan, but after all of that. And so and it's so cool here. You can get these tapes and then you put them in the little tape deck with your little headphones in the library. And I listened to it, and Joh Bjelke-Petersen was saying things to Don, who he's passed now, I knew him at the time, about, there's one point where he said, when I was Premier, people used to phone me all of the time and say, my dad's in prison, he was unfairly charged, blah, 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 all these injustices. And now, he says, in hindsight, now I realise how flawed the system is. And firstly, I realised he actually can speak in sentences. But I just could not believe that Don got this interview. So I'm sorry that's not related directly to my topic, but it's sort of part of that broader Triple Z history. But I think that was the gem. Wow. Yeah.
That is incredible. Here's a question to circle back for you, John. I'm not sure if somebody has made a typo or this is actually what they're saying. If it's what they're saying, it's a bit of a worry. But we'll progress. John included great women musicians, I think that is. But women are often underrepresented in the music scene. How do you think that will challenge your collection of stories?
Yeah, it sort of doesn't. I just keep kind of reaching out and trying not to kind of tokenise in any way, but at the same time, I don't use a lot. I hope my missus isn't here. I'm not a very analytical person. I don't analyse things. I just go with whatever feels right in all sorts of areas of my life. And in this list, you know, I think that I'm happy to kind of I'm just take it where it leads. You know, I can't think of another way of doing it, and it's because I'm not. I know it's silly to say I'm a researcher, but I'm not analytical. I know that there's a conflict there, or a tension or something, but you know, I think that's all I can say. And I'm very, like I said, I was open to Queensland Memory staff going, what about this, what about this? And some of their ideas were so bad and indecent obsession. But no, I want to be careful there because we know there's a connection to the staff. And but certainly there are, you know, when I first came up with this idea, just to say, oh, John, interview Queensland musicians. Well, there are tens of thousands of them. And, you know, covers bands playing in beer gardens up and down the coast, you know, hundreds and hundreds of bands, all terrible. And, but so I had to kind of narrow it and go and sort of and bring it down to sort of scope or something. I think it's probably quite telling that, say, songwriters, my age, 70s and 80s, coming up, you know, as young people, there are a lot more in my address book, men than women. But young people, it's really different now. But I'm not talking to young people, and I'm purposely not talking to young people because they have almost nothing to say. No, it's But if you want to talk to somebody about their life, you kind of have to wait until they've lived a lot of it. And so that's really why everybody's a bit old too. Because I think I talked about that, everybody's carking it. You know, you want to grab these stories from people before they die, and that's just very important. Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought as well in terms of there was a particular era that you were looking at, and I can imagine that when someone does a project like this in 20 years' time, there's going to be 50% or more women's faces up on those tiles.
Absolutely.
Because of the way, you know, that. But also, I have found that it's actually a little bit. I have found it difficult to get women to speak to me in the research for the book. Not people who are involved with Triple Z now, but there seems to be this sort of general sense of modesty as well, you know, that this different, like positioning themselves differently as being, oh, well, you know, like it's not, like I don't think I've got a very important story to tell. And so really, like I've actually found it, and I'm doing the book as a pure piece of journalism. It's not academic research. I'm doing that as a journalist. But when I think about it as a, like later on going, oh, what academic outputs can I get from this? I definitely really want to look at that phenomena of the gendered notions of who thinks that they have a contribution to tell in a story, because I think that it's interesting.
Yeah, especially around community work. People think that, if you're talking about what you're doing in relation to work in the community, that you're boasting or something like that. And I'm talking to entertainers who are just happy to talk about themselves all the time. There's no modesty in that world at all. So it's, it's quite different, isn't it? Yeah.
That's true.
I just wanted to...
Would you like to?
As somebody, look, I'm just going to answer
Can
this one very
somebody come
quickly.
and turn the
As someone who's a
TV
big
away
part
from
of the
John?
subject being researched, how do you navigate the bit where you have to maintain a level of distance from your research topic?
No, I
Just go and look it up. Autoethnography. Go and look it up.
Or
Right.
insider research as
There
well.
you go. See, so it's easy. You just do it. I'm sorry, Ruth.
let's go back to those diversity questions, shall we?
I like that.
Someone should take the
We
mic
circle
off.
back on women's voices.
One person has given their name. They've given their on-air radio name. It's still anonymous for the majority of people, but
It is.
we know who it is.
Look, we've got a few more minutes. I think we'll probably get a couple more questions. What I really...
What is that last question?
I don't know, but I think it'll be more about blokes, so we won't ask that one. I like...
Ruth, what were you thinking before any of that stuff there? Like today, when you were thinking about this, were there things that you...
I'm really fascinated with the collection of research and what's happening to history, and especially from a digitisation point of view, from all of our personal stories being held on third-party platforms like social media. A lot of art and creation is being promoted and held on third-party platforms and therefore owned by those platforms as well in many ways. So my fascination, and it is a bit of it's a bit doomsday, so I won't dread on it too much, but it is about the collection of people's stories and people's music, and the lack and how that is watering down community connection in a way. Or maybe it's transforming it, I'm not sure. Like, there are strong communities, but they're all held on third-party platforms. They're often not held in real life or face-to-face or in ways where we can hold each other through eyesight and pick up on non-verbal cues and feel empathy and create together and in a way that shows true connection. So, and that saddens me in a way, coming from a similar time frame and environment than both of you. I wonder where music and where art and where culture is going in that regard. And I wonder if you have the same apocalyptic thoughts as I do about that. Or do you see hope? Sometimes I don't see hope in a way.
I see hope in your venue. Do you know what I mean? The fact that you have this fantastic venue and it's small, but it's functional, it's vibrant, all sorts of stuff happens there. The pizzas are good, it's easy to park.
Feel free to keep going for 5 minutes and 40 seconds.
But that's what I think. I think, that's like, there's a real thing. People go there, they spend time with one another, they listen to new music, they listen to stupid music, they find, there's stuff they like, stuff they don't like, doesn't matter, but it's real, and it keeps happening, like people keep going. And I know other like Bearded Lady, I know that there are venues that are having trouble maintaining themselves in this world, and
I found that interesting, the connection to the Bellinos and counterculture in the Valley. That's been a really big part of Brisbane history, and I think, like, I grew up in the zoo era, so I very much model what I do on the feelings and thoughts of the way the zoo operated. And I find that most of the venues in the Valley were born out of that counterculture, out of the Fitzgerald era, the Valley, and it's still kind of that way. I'm yet to sort of see a right-wing live music venue in Brisbane.
Ooh, oh, here we go. Hey, there's a challenge.
Here's a can of worms.
Isn't it called Hillsong?
Yeah, or a Hillsong, yeah. Look, I really like this. My question's gone.
I answer the first question just briefly?
Oh, yeah,
It says,
sure.
as music people, how did you become library people? We can be both. But also, if you're a fan, especially of local music from the 90s and the 2000s, and you want to run into a whole load of people that were in bands back then, just hang out here because they all work here now. So we've all become library people.
That's true. There was a question on there, and I thought it was really a great one maybe to finish off with only 3 minutes to go. And it was along the lines of, did the research uncover something about yourselves?
I don't know if it uncovered anything about myself, but it reminded me how important it is that we do keep recording our histories and that we don't wait 30 years for somebody else to do that. And I think that that's why it's so important that when people ask you if you have materials that you don't want anymore, or ask you for your time to do videos like the ones that John produced, that if you have the capacity to say yes, because otherwise in 20 years' time, if you're in a band or if you're in any kind of prominent position, someone else is going to be saying what you did and what you thought. So jump at the chance to be able to do it in your own words so that somebody else doesn't do it for you.
Good one. And John, any...
I was actually just looking about that question, but is it just about the documenting the stories, or do you hope that your research is going to have some sort of impact?
Sure.
I don't care whether there's a change in radio or in music. Media and music change all the time. But I think that it's not just about bringing these things into the library. In the previous work that I've done, it's not just about bringing posters or handbills or photographs or people's collections into the library. It's what we do with them in order to bring people into rooms like this and talk about them, or to make stuff from it and then stick it out there in the digital world. The library does that stuff. So it's about dissemination, rather than collection, but as a complementary kind of process. So the storytelling is like a two-way street. People are telling us their stories, and then we're using those stories to tell new stories, where those things are galvanised and coalesced and put through the lenses that we have as creative people and storytellers ourselves. And those are the things that we have to just acknowledge, that this is what we do, and we do it well. Yeah.
And it's not necessarily changing the way that music happens or the way that radio happens, but one of the things that we can do as researchers is highlight the importance of things. And that's how government departments go about making their decisions on where to fund things, is that when there is scholarly peer-reviewed research that demonstrates the value of community radio, or that demonstrates the cultural capital of local music centres, they get funded. So I think in terms of being a scholaractivist, which is another cool word, like in terms of using your scholarly work in an activist perspective, then that's why we do the research. That's why I do the research, is to try and demonstrate in a language that government listens to about the value of these types of cultural endeavours.
Great.
I'd like to thank Tony Bellino Jr., who just got back to me earlier when I asked the question about whether his dad really did own the Love Inn, the Pinocchios. So if you're out there, thanks, TJ.
Yes, drink scotch on the rocks too. He does. Well, that is our time for the Q&A. I'll ask Vicky to pop back up and kick us off and give us a farewell. Thank you, John. Thank you, Heather. Thank you.